to another very special episode of the Uncensored, Unfiltered, and Unapologetically Black podcast show, Speak to the Mic. I am your illustrious host, Marlon Joseph. And ladies and gentlemen, you all know the drill here on this show. We like to impart education on the Black community being provided to you by Black men and women of all professions, entities, and organizations. And we do it in the most unapologetically Black way we know how. Make sure you like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel, to Spotify, to Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all other podcast platforms you can find this show on. Make sure that you are subscribing to it because you don't want to miss this content that's being pumped out to each and every one of us in the Black community, because we all know the information hits home a lot differently when it's coming from people who look like us and share similar and idealistic backgrounds that we all share. You don't want to miss this episode and previous episodes of this podcast. Joining me today, a very, very intellectual Black woman by the name of Nicole Doyle, who is a solution-oriented home education advocate who focuses on providing assistance that enables individual families to achieve their family mission. He also serves her community as the president of the Dekalb Christian Home Educators. Here to speak with me about just the significant difference that we are seeing more now, just subtotal in the last 3 years when it comes to homeschooling our children versus, our children resuming education back into the modern day traditional classrooms, right? So here to talk with me about just how to even get into the weeds of how do we possibly transition over from the classroom to possibly homeschooling our children. Nicole, thank you for taking so much time out of your busy day to talk with me about this. Obviously, as you know, this has been an ongoing conversation that most people are starting to have more now, especially within the last 3 years, when it comes to the idea of or the possibility of homeschooling their children. And so for you to be a huge advocate in this particular area, I thought it would be only appropriate that I had you on the show to talk about this. Thank you so much for being on the show to talk about
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I want to kind of like dive into the origin of this, right? So obviously everything has a beginning and everyone has a beginning to what their journey looks like. And so for you, I would like to know from you personally, how did you even come up with this idea or even just stumble across possibility of homeschooling your children versus keeping them in the traditional classrooms?
Well, I have 4 kids, and I graduated 2 homeschoolers into college. I have a senior at Kennesaw State and a freshman at Morehouse College. And I came into homeschooling those children. One was in the 7th grade, 4th grade, 1st grade, and pre-K. And I pulled those children from school, not for any particular reason. My second child at the time, who was in the 4th grade, was having a lot of difficulties, and I was spending a lot of time already volunteering at the school, being a volunteer librarian because the school didn't have a librarian at the time, and just being just all around involved parent. A teacher actually suggested to me homeschooling to help get him caught up and back on track. And because she was considering leaving the profession to start homeschooling her child,
Yeah,
because he also had some issues like ADD and ADHD, similar to my child. And so when she kind of suggested that to me, rather than just jumping into something, I did a little research. And so there was a book. It's called How I Homeschool My African American Boys to the Ivy League by
wow.
Paula Penn Norbert.
Mm.
And a lot of people may not know, but her grandfather actually was co-counsel with Thurgood Marshall in Brown versus Board of
Oh,
Education.
wow.
So to read her book where she felt like she was stepping away from something that was fought so hard by, her in as a part of a legacy,
Yeah,
and reading her book. And then I reached out to her on Facebook just to see. And she actually had a conversation with me about homeschooling. And it was really about the fact that we have the freedom to do what we would like to do educationally in the United States with our children,
yeah,
and that I owe no one any answer. Is if I'm looking at my child and I see issues, my only job is to jump in there and help that child with the issue. And so I just jumped into homeschooling um tentatively and carefully at first. And Then I got another suggestion from a veteran homeschooling mom, who actually homeschooled her children and was helping to homeschool her grandkids, who said, just stop doing school, which I thought was really strange. But
Yeah.
it's a method called unschooling. And so for the first semester of school, we basically just went to the library and read books. I know people at the library thought I was crazy. Every child would come in there with a clothes basket and they would fill it up with their books, and we would go home and read and eat and read about different cultures and read about just our people. And we're
Hmm.
already here in Atlanta, so spending time at Martin Luther King's childhood home, the memorial, just going through even Spelman having an art gallery there, just looking at the Indian mounds in Macon, just really deciding to make education hands-on. And then after that, we just decided to do something more formal.
Yeah.
So we did go into a curriculum, but I wanted my kids to have a semester where they fell back in love with education.
Okay.
They
So,
were
so
hating school. Having three boys and one girl, the boys were like, I don't want to read. I don't like school. And I'm like,
like most
I'm going to
boys, yeah,
find
yeah,
what you like and I am going to dig in, and
yeah.
and each one of them, they really did find the thing that they love, and they are my oldest one is on computer science at Kennesaw State, like I said, a senior, and he participated in robotics. I was also a robotics coach for several years, and I'm currently a robotics mentor with First Robotics, also judging robotics out of seismic at Georgia Tech with the First Lego League as a judge. And then my second child, he really loved theater and singing, and just to really go into that, and now he is on the Morehouse Glee Club. He's coming back home today off of a 2-week tour with them. So it was just trying to figure out my children's individual passions, finding all the educational and academic and emotional supports I can to get that done for them individually. Um, which it can be a hard thing to try to individualize education, but my husband and I made a decision that, hey, you can jump in it. So I pulled away from the workforce during that time. And that's basically what I've been doing. It's been a blessing. But ultimately, the best thing that has come out of this is to actually see children have uninhibited Black child joy. They laugh hard. They crack jokes that are, unique to their little family and their community. You know how some kids are. They have their own little thing. And they are okay with themselves. And most importantly, because I have 4 kids, they're friends. I want my children to be friends with each other. I mean, I'm not going to be here forever refereeing everything, but just to see
Absolutely.
my 19-year-old who's on tour give more updates to his 21-year-old brother than his mama and dad about where he is. I want to be in the loop, but it does warm my heart that they're actually friends.
Yeah, I mean, you know what, and it's funny because so a couple of things that you said that kind of like stood out. So obviously there are pros and cons and some concerns and trepidations about transitioning over from the traditional ways of learning in the classroom to homeschooling, and most people oftentimes have some of the same concerns about, okay, what if they fall too far behind, what if they aren't really quite catching up to the reading level that they should be at that particular point in time. But for you, like what were some of the initial concerns that both you and your husband had when even deciding to pull them out of the traditional classroom into homeschooling? What was that conversation like though, as parents? Like, okay, was one person on board while the other person wasn't, or was it kind of like a universal, like you all were pretty much like of sound mind on what you agreed and disagreed on? Like, how did that look? What was that conversation like for you all?
No, there was no agreement, man. No. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. So I was spending so much time at the school because I had a child who was really having a lot of difficulties. And so, y- my husband is I truly prophet, priest, protector, provider. And he is like, look here, girl, don't pull these kids out of school and have defects at my door. Like, what, what? Why is he at home? Like he was yeah, yeah, that year, that child constantly would fake a stomach ache or this or that. And so I was like, okay, I got to figure out what's going on because I felt like it was weighing on his mental health a little bit that he really was not liking the school as much. And it was just the academics, it wasn't the teachers. He had some of the most wonderful teachers who would call me and would say, hey, so Xavier's saying he has a stomach ache again. We're about to do a math test. Just want to let you know what's up in the circumstance. Like, all right, girl, I hear you.
So it was
You
pretty
know,
much anticipated that he was about to fake
he's
an
about to fake
ailment
this
just
thing.
to get out of
They,
class. So,
so we were not totally, so when I say we weren't on the same page, we weren't on the same page, but we were just basically like, he was like, something's got to give. And I was like, I'm trying to do something different. So at that time, I found a homeschool group, the Dekalb Christian Home Educators that I'm the president of now, and they were doing these like little workshops on the weekend talking about homeschooling. And we went to one of the workshops and they had a homeschooling fathers panel that was all Black men. And they were talking about this was like
wow.
2014. And I never forget, it was Dr. Alan Shaw, who is a computer science professor at Kennesaw State. It was, Tom Bosley. I remember these men sitting there who are men who some work in academia, some work in corporate. One of them even, I think he was, and so I'm looking at them like, okay, talk to my husband. And so I was praying for an answer, but to hear other Black men go, oh yeah, it's gonna cost more than you thought. It's gonna take more time than you thought. But here's the thing, you are a pivotal part in this. If you're educating at home, it's a tag team effort. And to really hear some Black men say, you can do this. This is a beautiful thing to be all in, super involved in your children. And he listened not just to them give encouragement, but to them lay out some practical ways, because let's be honest, men are working. A lot of y'all are like, yeah, it's fine to homeschool, but we got a light bill to pay around here.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
so they were like, what are the proactive ways you can jump in? So my husband, listening to them, one of the things that he came with, because he is a tech support engineer, he started taking over the math, teaching the kids math, and teaching algebra 1, algebra 2, pre-cal, calculus. We're going to try first hand at calculus will be next year. So pray for us. But and him going through it, and even though we're using an outside teacher, for him to be the in-between tutor that's looking at their homework and they're feeling it does something bigger. So these kids are, they're doing schoolwork, but when they get to a roadblock, it's teaching a pivotal lesson about when you get to a roadblock, you can look to your daddy for answers, right? You know that when you're in the midst of making these mistakes on this paper, turn around and be like, Dad, I need some help. I don't understand. And for him
Yeah.
to stop, listen, help them through the frustrations,
Yeah.
correct them when they're wrong. Also to say, hey man, you're really not giving your best on this. I can
Yeah,
already tell
and
you barely wrote
providing
the problem.
that assistance in real time does help versus having to wait for a tutor or wait till you get home and things like that. And hours have gone by, and you're just like, okay, now I'm just at this standstill. I can't figure this out. But having that parent there who can provide assistance in that particular subject area right then and there can help you solve, or at the very least, not give you the answer, but help you find out what the answer is. And I know a lot of times too, as parents, we oftentimes, not everyone, but there are some parents who are not as educationally inclined to be able to provide those answers or solutions to those problems that they're finding that their kids are having in these different subjects. So a lot of times they either have to, like now we have Google, you Google something, you look it up, you figure
YouTube
out, okay,
University.
yeah, absolutely. And social media and Google University are two tools that can be useful when used properly, right? But at the same time, you don't want to provide the answer to the child because then that basically hinders them from figuring it out themselves. You want them to figure it out, but you want to help them, kind of help guide them through figuring out what the answer is to that question. And so, and I know for me personally, and I've realized this in the last 3 years, we've seen a huge transition from the traditional ways of our children learning in the classroom to being obviously at home virtually learning. And then they kind of transitioning from there to having that hybrid environment to where it be some home and then some, in the classroom. But for some parents today, within the last 3 years, these parents really got the chance to actually really be exposed to how their children are learning now or lack thereof in the classroom. How well are they doing in these specific areas and what do they need the
Hmm.
most help in? So now you're seeing a huge influx in a lot of parents transitioning over to homeschooling their children. And just for you as an advocate of this, I want to know, like, what has been that transition like? Have you seen a huge number of people transitioning over from the traditional ways of learning to homeschooling their children and knowing that it's going to require more time from them as parents to be really fully hands-on involved with the upbringing of their children's education.
Yes, we have seen increase in the numbers. So the pandemic forced 9 million children all over the United States to go into some type of homeschooling like situation. Sometimes we call it pandemic schooling because many of us,
Yeah.
even the ones who are homeschooling, were just like, okay, so we got to figure this out. Um, from that number, in the fall of 2019, we had Black homeschooling children made up only 3.3% according to the census.
Hmm.
After the pandemic, we are 16.1% of that
Wow.
population that stayed after.
Wow.
Now,
So they don't
in
even account for the
homeschooling,
ones who actually did go in but didn't stay. But that's
these are the
just
ones who stayed.
just specifically talking about the ones who stayed in the homeschooling. Okay. Wow, that's
So
interesting.
the one thing I want to be clear about, homeschooling, when we say homeschooling, I think a better term would be home education a little bit. And the reason I say
Yeah.
home education is because homes everybody is not going to be that person in the classroom teaching their child hands on. I mean,
Hmm.
thank you, God, for, some out school and for some Zoom
Yeah.
classes
Yeah.
and for some virtual environments and some hybrid environments. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, having children who taken a variety of classes, I definitely can't teach them everything. I am not
Yeah.
that expert.
Yeah.
But home education really means that the power is in the parent's hand to
Yeah.
be the complete architect of education. And so, what a lot of parents found out during this pandemic was that, you know what? My child has giftings,
Hmm.
my child has needs that may or may not be being met by the school system or by you, because
Yeah.
some of this came down to some of us were like, okay, I'm not talking to my child enough. I had one parent say, girl, I didn't realize this boy know how to eat with a fork right. I got him home all day. And I was like, do you know how? And
that,
then you were like,
that, that,
ooh,
that speaks to the lack of observation that parent is obviously not purview to even seeing what their child
because
is
you're
actually
working.
learning how to do or have learned how to do in that course period of time. So, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes as parents, and this is, we're all guilty of this as parents. We sometimes get too busy, too tied up in other worldly things or even our work stuff that we do miss out on very little small intricate parts in our children's upbringing and lives and what they're learning to adapt to and what they're learning about in general. It's like, oh wow, I didn't even know you knew how to do that. But we never asked the question if
They're
you knew how to do that.
smarter than you know.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes they don't know things that you thought they knew. So
Yeah.
it's good, but I what I found in the space of no shame, because we have like mom mentoring get-togethers, and we were like, okay, so what was your moment, your shame moment that somebody was
Yeah.
like, and sometimes mom be like, okay, let me tell you what happened. I just found out
Yeah.
that my child did not know he was supposed to wash his neck. And, and everybody kind of laughed, like, girl, because you just assume if I taught you how to basically bathe, all
Right.
parts of the body are getting hit. And it's just you realize that how important you are, that you're literally teaching every little step. And so we're looking at parents going, no harm, no foul. You didn't see everything, you didn't know everything. But home education doesn't mean you have to have your child right in front of you every day. You
Right.
could be in a micropod, you could be in a hybrid school. You can even find yourself a private school. The main thing about home education, that's why I started a new venture called the Georgia Black Educators Network, was
Mm-hmm.
because we wanted parents to be like, okay, so here is the buffet of education.
Yeah.
And even if your child's in public school, charter school, private school, homeschool, we want you to be like, as I'm looking at everything in one place, what can I pick and choose from the buffet to grow a complete child that is physically, mentally, academically whole? Because it is easier to raise a joyful child than to fix a broken adult. And we have too many people out here who, if I know we're working, and that is always a big thing, but you finding the form of education that works for your family,
Yeah,
but it also grows your child. So even though I am a home education advocate, one of the things I really am is a parent advocate. So because this is you, God gave you this child. You are, and that's a gift you were given, but you have the ability to teach them so much. Because even though you may not be homeschooling your child, I always tell people, what can you teach your child? So right now you're doing a podcast.
yeah,
So you can sit with your son and explain to him, hey, let me explain to you how this Audacity works over here
absolutely.
and which mic you should lose. Let's look at our social media metrics and
Mhm.
along the way introducing your personal genius. I always say people have a niche area they're super equipped in, and
Yeah,
there's a niche area. If you look into society, there are so many people who learn and are able to do amazing things because they learned it from someone in their family. And this is an
yeah,
African tradition that has
absolutely,
come down.
absolutely, absolutely. That's very true. And even to expound on that, right? So again, going back to the point of the last 3 years during this pandemic, we each parent start to really dive into how their children are learning or lack thereof. Like whether your child is an audio learner, visual learner, like hands-on learner, you
Hmm.
start to really be exposed to what type of learner your child is. And now you start to basically ingratiate yourself in their education a lot more, seeing as though how you can actually help them in areas they're lacking in that yourself may be, you may have perfected in, or you may be a profession in that particular area, or even for a challenge, more challenging parent specifically, if they don't even specialize in that area and they don't really know that much about it, at the very least you've done is research how you can help the child help themselves, even if you don't
Yes.
know yourself exactly how this particular subject is supposed to be ran and how you're supposed to basically learn this. You're at the very least you've helped your child even discover something about themselves that they didn't even know either, and that you yourself didn't even know. But a lot of times we have parents who are obviously from a socioeconomic standpoint, we have parents who are in the lower class and in poverty where they're not as educated as most of our kids are. So they don't even know what they don't know until the question gets asked, mommy or daddy, do you know how to do this? Or can you help me with this? Well, I don't know that. So now it's about looking for the solution to that, looking for a tutor, looking for a particular person who actually specializes in an area who can help your child in this particular area. So, but in the interest of full transparency, I want to also be clear that, and I want you to kind of validate this for me. So homeschooling your children is not for the weak. It's not for the weak at all. So, or the inconvenience either. So, and I want to say that because I want to put extra emphasis on the conveniency of being able to homeschool your child. So everyone doesn't have the flexibility or the time or even the
Mm-mm.
bandwidth or even the bank account, if you will, to be able to step away from their job and say, I'm gonna be full time into this homeschooling my child or my children and helping them get ahead in life where they won't have to even rely on the traditional ways of learning in the classroom. But what are some of the concerns that you have heard from those parents who are thinking about this idea of homeschooling their children, but just not quite understanding exactly how much of them it's going to require to do that? And when I say them, I'm saying the parents in being able to start to minimize the number of hours they work in, or even just stop working altogether. How difficult has that been, even in the circle of people that you've obviously been connected with? What has been the most consistent thing being said about those parents with those challenges?
So Black families are really not, they don't function within those norms of what I feel like the rest of what the homeschooling world looks like. So many
Absolutely.
people, when they think about homeschooling, they think about mommy who stays home all the time, daddy goes to work, and mommy just homeschooling. I'm gonna be honest with you. I can't think of too many Black women in my homeschool community that don't have that either don't have a job or a business.
Absolutely.
Like they are literally, even myself with having my own consulting business. We have moms who are real estate agents who they figured it out, but I will make sure I say this. Homeschooling your children in that way is a privilege. Let's not pretend
It
like it's
is.
not. It is a
Yeah.
financial privilege. It
Mhm.
is an access privilege. It is an educational privilege. And so many times when I'm speaking to parents where that's not their ability at this time, due to the fact they may be a single mom. And it's very interesting. There is a study done by Dr. Cheryl Field Smith out of University of Georgia, and it is how it's about homeschooling. It's a homeschooling study that she did with mothers in Metro Atlanta and Washington D.C., talking about single Black mothers, how homeschooling as a form of resistance,
Wow.
and how some of them have taken have are living in are to have sole homes or are only driving one car. I know for myself in my household, when we started homeschooling, we went down to one car. I was like, okay, so we can't do two car notes. And I'm already home, so then I'm like, okay, I'm cooking a ton more, and I guess HGTV is going to become my friend at this point, because I'm just gonna be cooking every single meal.
Yeah.
But I recognize that's not everybody's place of happiness.
Absolutely.
And it's you as a woman, that doesn't have to be your spot. I like to cook. I like to, do certain things, but that may not be your space of happiness. That may not be God calling you to be. He may be calling you to be at this particular job. You are
Yeah.
supposed to be doing these things. What I try to say to parents as a parent, as an educational autonomy and parent advocate, is
Mhm.
that even if your child's in public school or private school, you're still educating your child.
Yeah.
Take the time to try to partner with your teachers, partner with the people who are in the classroom with your teachers, who are there, who are actually helping your children. Also, we do have some parents who don't realize they have a form of capital. So we have capital, that's financial capital, but you have social capital. Social capital means the community, and let's be clear, the safe, discerned community that supports and will take care of your child. Not everybody's meant to be around your child. I don't care if they're related to you. I don't care what. I don't care if they go to your church, whatever. Be aware.
Yeah,
Not
that's
everybody
true.
deserves
Now,
the
now all
gift
skin
of
folk is
knowing
kinfolk, and
you and
now
your
all
family.
kinfolk now all kinfolk is the same kinfolk. You know what I mean? So
No, it's not.
you have to be
So
very
I
wary of
always
that.
tell
Yeah,
parents, like, be aware of
yeah,
that you do have social capital and that there are people who will function with you and help you. I know at Dekalb Christian Home Educators, our community been around since 1989. And so it's been around that long because these are Black mothers who have been helping each other with a variety of things. Like my daughter, today is World Think Day for Girl Scouts, and she's with four other homeschoolers. They were doing that this morning, and I had to leave. And so one of the homeschool moms said, I got you. I'd bring her home after we stop at Brewster's. I have taken the time to be a community member, to evaluate my community. But I do understand that that's not everybody's ability. And even based upon socioeconomics and location, or even the actual support staff at your school, that may be difficult. So I say to parents, do as much research as you can as possible. And there's always ways that you can incorporate and bring education to your children, because we do have many programs. We're here in Metro Atlanta. So here in Metro Atlanta, there are things that are free. The Sphinx organization, which is an organization that works with children who play string instruments that are Hispanic and Latino, is having a free concert to showcase their virtuosos next week. And so that's and so you find those things. And that's why we put together the Georgia Black Home Educators Network. And every time we're speaking to these organizations, we're finding out about free tickets and a free things. We're making sure to put that in one place. Recently, the swim school here that's in DeKalb County, they have homeschool scholarships so children can learn how to swim in cooperation with a program out of DeKalb Health Services. There are things that we as organizers and know, and I think the detriment to sometime in our community is that we don't tell every good thing that's available to other people's children. And so
And
I
yeah,
am
that
constantly
being able to
saying,
disperse that
tell.
information, absolutely. That is key to improving the community around you, improving the neighborhood. You can't just keep this type of vital information to
Yeah.
yourself and not disperse it to those who you know need this information. And which is ultimately this is the premise of this podcast, is to give out that type of information that people who look like us will ultimately need and obviously find applicable to their own everyday lives. And so information is very important, and the right information can go a long way. And so to your point, absolutely.
And something else that has been a barrier for many other parents, and I just attended a conference on this, has been the digital connectivity lack of equity. So we have some neighborhoods, they don't have high-speed internet available in the neighborhood, either rural or urban. It's not available there. The not having access to a laptop or anything. I mean, let's be honest. Some tablets are glorified large cell phones, but they may not be adequate for all the things a child's trying to do in that particular classroom.
Absolutely.
So I've been working with an organization called CompuDocs, and they are actually providing modems and laptops to families who fill out an application so that they can have some digital connectivity. Because how even if you did want to do hybrid schooling, or if your child wanted to do some additional courses work on the weekend, that's difficult if you don't have something to give your child access past the cell phone in your hand. So I don't think many people are thinking about it. So many of our children have fallen behind during the pandemic
Yep.
because they were handed a device that parents may or may not have been trained on completely, because things happen
Yep.
so fast. But
Yep.
not just that, the child may have the device, but they may not have high speed internet at their
Don't have
home
internet, so it's like it's useless to have a
or at
laptop, and
all.
you're not able to even access the curriculum that's virtually available to your child, or your child is supposed to be on Teams or on Zoom or whatever for like
Hmm.
virtual classroom learning. And then if they don't have internet, how are they able to even stay abreast of what's going on educationally in their classroom? So yeah, and I've read articles and seen, watched the news a few times where obviously the current administration is trying to help provide, and even certain states are actually advocating for parents to obviously be given the Wi-Fi and internet access throughout their neighborhoods and in each home of the neighborhood. So I'm seeing more of that is starting to happen, obviously, but it's going to take some time before everyone is fully equipped with high speed internet to be able to,
Yes.
be able to learn and obviously educate their kids, especially those who want to choose that path of homeschooling. But I know for some people, and I've had conversations about this with friends of mine when it comes to the possibility of homeschooling. Some of the concerns are, okay, what's the differences and similarities that children have at home in homeschool learning versus the traditional ways of learning? Like how are they able to stay at the reading and math levels of the kids who are learning traditionally in the classroom? And is there a big difference or drastic difference between the two?
So 75%, between 75, I think, and 85% of Black homeschooling students score higher than their white counterparts in public school.
Wow,
That's just what we are. So
that
it's just
is wow, that is just
that
mind
that is
blowing.
that is a toot your horn right there. And
Absolutely,
not only
absolutely,
that, when you go to some of the Ivy League colleges website
yeah.
and you go to the admission portion, you will notice they have now a drop down. I think Harvard has a drop down, and so does Yale, that says homeschool portfolios.
Wow. So even so, some people who have the concerns of their kids who are obviously homeschooled in high school, there's some legitimate concerns about them possibly being able to be admitted and enrolled in colleges. But now colleges are providing that information that states, okay, this child was admitted, even being homeschooled. So we're seeing a
Yes.
large percentage in kids who are homeschooled on the high school level from 9 to 12, they were able to still get into these, prestigious universities.
And succeed and actually retain, matriculate through, because what we found is that um, and this statistic about homeschool really goes back to another statistic, parental involvement.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
statistics show that parental involvement, I don't care if your child's in public, private, charter, home, parental involvement, supportive parental involvement is definitely something that keeps children in school longer, doing better. I think about the fact that even with my own son, even though he is at Morehouse and he does have the ADD, I did have to do a 504, which is a an accommodations paperwork for when
Okay.
your students are in college. And it's basically to say that so he gets more time on math tests. He gets more time when he's doing an essay based test. And they even have options on there, which is not one of his options, where you can get a transcript of the teacher's lecture or
Hmm.
be allowed to bring a recording device into class, either audio or video, well,
Yeah.
mostly audio, to be able to get the information. You get primary seating. So let's say you're in a large class and they say, well, these seats up front are for these students who are there. And so to understand that I can actually get that for him so that he can learn to manage what's going on, because he still and he meets once I think once every 2 weeks with an academic counselor on campus.
Okay.
And
So
this is
there's some
all a part of that
educational
accommodate.
accommodations
Yes,
for
that's a
those who have like certain challenges as it pertains to certain particular areas that they actually
and
like.
all colleges
All
according to
colleges.
the ADA
Yeah.
have to have this in place. And then to know as a parent, when your child's in college, the college doesn't have to communicate with you about your child at any
Absolutely.
time.
Absolutely. They're an
But
adult
I
now.
filled out a FERPA. A FERPA is a form that you send to the admissions to
Yeah.
say that if you need to communicate on your child's behalf in reference to their academic things, you can. Now, I always tell parents, please don't end up all in your child's busy. Your child's at college, let them have a life.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
but I always say I am not a helicopter parent. I am a drone. I
There you
hover
go.
quietly at a distance.
There
I
you go.
do not interfere. I surveil the dangers. But
Hmm.
if I need to, you will understand why a drone is a weapon of mass destruction at any time. So I
Facts.
want
I
to
like
make sure that I stay as completely far back to let them have a life and let them have fun. I only interfere when I'm looking at things academically because I can't see his blackboard.
yeah.
That I'm like, and I do check with him and say, hey, just check with your academic counselor, because I'm trying to put the responsibility of him staying on track. I know it's difficult for
Hmm.
him to stay on track, but I want to keep putting that into his preview because he's going to be a man with a
Absolutely.
job who has to pay bills.
Absolutely. Yep. Responsibilities that he's gonna have to be able to fend for himself and be able to provide for himself. But even as parents, right? So we typically enough as our kids get older, we transition from a provider to an advisor, right? So now we're in a
Exactly.
position to actually give them advice and help support them in their decision making with whatever decision they go with, but just giving them the pros and cons of what those different decisions could ultimately be for them based on our own experiences and just based on experiences in retrospect, right? So, but for younger kids, obviously we have to be more hands-on and more
Yes.
involved and be able to be right there with them to help them be codependence with them, like help them understand what that independence, what that looks like, but then obviously give them some responsibilities here and there, just little bits of responsibilities that they can handle themselves, just to show the maturation is actually happening in real time. So that's very key to their to just their overall growth and development. We want to be able to give them some responsibilities as they continuously get older, just to show, okay, what I'm instilling in you, it's actually registered. You actually accepting this information as from me as your parent, saying that okay,
Hmm.
my mom and dad told me this, and this happened because of that. So okay, now I get it. Okay, let me just show them. Hey, mommy, hey, daddy, I got it now. I can do it.
Hmm.
Okay, good. All right. Now I can start taking my hands off things a lot more to
Hmm.
show that you can do a lot more on your
But
end.
you said something really beautiful there when you say I transition from provider to advisor.
Yeah.
When you were talking about being an or as my husband probably say, supervisor. to
Well, yeah,
advise.
that too. Absolutely. Because sometimes
But
the advisory got to be a little super than normal, right? So depending on, because listen, we know our children better than anybody else do. So
yes,
we have to be honest with ourselves and honest with them. We know what certain responsibilities they can and can't handle based on circumstances. But that's not to say that they won't ultimately get there to a point where they're able to handle more later. It's just right now, okay, these are the challenges you're facing right now. And I know that because I know you, right? So it's
because I know
understanding.
you.
It's getting to know, it's understanding the ins and outs of your children and what they lack, what they gain, or what they're specializing in, or what they're becoming of themselves, right? We have to give them that leeway to show us what we're instilling in them. It's going to come into fruition at a certain point in time when it needs to, right? So we have to, at some point in time, we got to take our hands off that bike and let them ride it. And if they, fall off of it, little scrapes here and there, that's okay because life is going to treat them that way. But you got to get back on that bike. You got to keep riding, and you have to keep perfecting how you ride that bike until you get to a
Yeah.
place where, okay, now I can move on to a car or a motorcycle, whatever the case may be. But it's graduating to those levels of things first, but understanding what the responsibility is at this level first. Yeah,
Yeah, and the
that's very true.
interesting thing about homeschooling that I have found is that when you were talking about progressing to an advisor, is that every school year I sit with my kids to really go over, okay, so what were our academic goals? Where did you progress? Where did you just didn't do what you were supposed to do? Tell me how you're feeling about this. Tell me what adjustments you need today. You keep putting it back in their corner because in the process of advising them, I'm also saying, hey, here's some responsibility on some things. So like my daughter looked at me one day, and I kid you not, this little girl was in the first grade going to second grade, and she said, okay, so this curriculum is not working. So I was like, and she said it's not. And then she turned to the social studies section and she said, this is a picture of a child from Europe. This is a picture of a child from an Asian country. And she said, why is this picture of this child from an African country has a hut in the background? She said, I know for a fact I have a friend from Nigeria. That is not what that looks like.
Yeah,
And so,
yes,
and and to be in the going to the second grade and saying,
yeah,
I'm gonna need a new curriculum.
yeah,
And because we constantly having this conversation about, we want to put amazing mirrors and beautiful images in front of our children. We want
absolutely,
our children
absolutely,
to have that. That's one of the things of homeschooling, but that's not just to homeschool. I would say to home education because when you have your child with you and you're just talking about the world, you're imparting your worldview on things and that they're beautiful, they're wonderfully made, that they are special. Part of me advising them in their academic portion is me sitting down and going through, yes, this is academics, but I also want you to take accountability as I am advising you. So, what kind of person do you want to be? How do you
absolutely.
see yourself? And to
Mm.
have those conversations, I know so many people who have met homeschoolers, and the first thing they'll say to me is like, those children are super eloquent and can communicate
Well
so
mannered,
well
yep,
and
yep,
tell you exactly what they're feeling and everything because we give you the space to say how you feel. I always say to my children, you can tell me anything with respect
absolutely.
and to understand that I am still an adult and I will choose what I think is appropriate. But I will
Yeah,
give you the
absolutely, yeah,
space
yep.
to talk to
To
me.
voice
And
your
we are
thoughts, yep,
in a space where I do feel like, and I think this is a wonderful thing, we have children who are right now understanding boundaries.
yep,
And that's just you as an adult having those conversations with your daughter, with your son, sitting with them and them understanding, you know what? My daddy treats me amazingly well.
yeah,
I don't think I'm gonna be out in the streets with this dude who does not treat me
absolutely.
amazingly well.
Because that standard has already been established. So anything below that is going to be very visible to her. And so, and my wife and I try to instill that in both my son and my daughter. And so, obviously, my daughter's, she's young. She's about to be 6 in September. My son will be 2 in July. So, obviously this is the beginning stages of it, but my daughter is very vocal about her feelings about things that happen, happy or sad. She just randomly say, "Daddy, I love you so much." And I'm just like, "I love you too, lady. I appreciate you for
Oh,
telling me." And then if I say something to her that hurts her feelings, Daddy, that hurts my feelings, and I have to sit and listen to that, and I have to give her her opportunity and her voice to be able to voice her thoughts about what those emotions look like for her. And
and that's
and
home education right there. That's home
absolutely,
education
well,
in a nutshell.
in a
Because
way, in
you
the
are
form of it,
no,
absolutely,
you are really giving her a sense of self, but then
yeah,
you are really helping her to form a thought. You know what? I know that this doesn't feel good, and so I'm gonna in this space because think about it takes a lot for a 6-year-old
yeah,
to look at a grown man and say, you hurt my feelings. So there's a lot of confidence.
yeah,
There's a lot of
yeah,
confidence.
yeah, yeah.
And I commend
Yes,
you. I
that
commend
is
you
so.
for being in that space to be like, okay, now I
Yeah.
gotta sit down. Okay, now what did I do?
Well,
Because we
listen,
do
it
that.
takes a lot
Yeah,
of
I
prayer, it takes a lot of
understand.
thought, it takes a lot of intentionality. So my wife and I are very intentional about how we
That's good.
bring our children up
That's good.
versus how we were brought up. I know for me, I would never given that voice. I would never given that opportunity. And if I ever
Me
said
neither.
something, they even mimicked something similar to that, I may not be having much teeth left. May not have a nose, or I may be missing an eye, something. I don't know. But all I'm saying is we are in a place now, especially, and I can really commend my generation, my millennial generation, for doing this. We're in a
Hmm.
space now where we're providing that opportunity for our kids to be vocal about what they do and do not like and what their boundaries look like and things like that, or even helping them understand what boundaries are. They're starting to be more exposed to that now, and we're the ones exposing them to that type of thing, and that's a beautiful thing, especially given that, to your
Hmm.
point, that's a piece of home education. We're teaching them things or reinforcing things that some of which they may have been learning in school too. But as parents, we are the enforcers and reinforcers when it comes to that, and we have to be very mindful of that. So
Hmm.
the obvious things that the healthy environments, the loving relationships that we have, and being able to have those good and bad days, but expressing to our children, hey, you can express your thoughts and feelings respectfully, but let me know because you have a voice too. I can't just be all talk, and you just listen. No, it has to be a two-way street. But with those boundaries and respect levels still established, yeah, you can absolutely be able to voice your opinion about things and how you feel about it. That's fair, and we'll take what you're saying in consideration and be able to make that judgment call thereafter. But even kind of circling back to the educational piece. So for you, I do know that you and I spoke about this, and this was very key that you said this in regards to how the field tripping and being able to still stay abreast of the curriculum from the homeschool standpoint. What has been the resources that's been provided, or has it been an increase in resources that's been given to those parents who are choosing to homeschool their children? What does that curriculum or those resources look
So out here we have a lot of there's as you can see, as we say the edupreneur market or educational entrepreneur
like? I
market.
like that entrepreneur. I
It's
dig.
yeah, it's edupreneur market. It jumps because you have so many people who are like, oh, I'm able to offer a product online
Yeah.
and it can create passive income. So any curriculum of any type, of any direction that you want is available. They even have, everything from classical Christian homeschooling curriculum to classical education curriculum that is with African centered history and things like that, all
Mhm.
the way to there's even something called woke homeschooling. So,
What?
there yes, there's a curriculum.
Really?
And
Please,
so,
I need you.
yes,
You can't just skate past that. I need you to expound on that. I don't think I ever
I
heard
don't.
that term.
I
What is
know.
woke
I know the lady.
homeschooling? Because I
She's
don't
a
like
great
how this
woman.
term woke
But
has been hijacked. It's been hijacked and taken
no,
from
but she
us.
no, she is a black homeschooling mom who was homeschooling
Okay.
before the pandemic. And so what she decided to do was just actually dive into more history
Okay.
and things like that. And so I have I know some parents who have used her curriculum. I personally haven't. and everything. But I have looked at it. So we're just looking at various types of homeschooling.
Yeah.
However, because they do even have homeschooling called African with a K.
Okay.
African with a C. You have
Yeah.
the Christian, the classical, the traditional. You
Hmm.
have the eclectic homeschooling. You have unschooling. Unschooling is your child gets up in the morning and says, I just want to learn about trains and trucks and I want to draw. And you just say, we're just going to go with it. And so
Okay.
you
So
make
so these
everything,
are various types of homeschool
yes, various
okay.
types of methods and
Methods. Yeah.
philosophy, Charlotte
Okay.
Mason, there's all these types. So if you just Google homeschool, you'll see all these different things. And so what we wanted to do was to say, as parents are looking for what's best for them, part of that is you're looking for what can fit into your schedule.
Yeah.
Because if you're pulling away from the workforce, you're going to be doing traditional homeschooling with curriculum.
Okay. Yeah. Something must have happened. It froze up and it just went in and out. So okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So I will start back at, so there are different philosophies and different methods of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And even though you're looking for the method that works best for you, the main thing is to focus on your child. So what type of learner are they? And you learner are they? And you just alluded to this earlier when you were talking about your child a visual learner, audio learner. How do they take in information? And that's actually an important part of this, just to
Yeah.
sit and to understand your child. Um, I would also say one of the things that some parents are concerned about is like, how do you homeschool in Georgia? So in many states,
Yeah.
you actually could type in homeschooling for the state. So here in the state of Georgia, we have to do a declaration of intent. Declaration of intent is basically informing the school system, my child will not be attending your traditional public school system, and that I
Yeah.
am taking responsibility for that. In the state of Georgia, every 3 years, you have to test your child. You could test your child with the ITBS or various other tests. And these tests are actually, you can buy an ITBS online. It's only like $35.
Okay.
There
Okay.
are
So this
companies
is
that,
just once every 3 years that you'll be able to test them.
yes, so
Okay.
third
Versus every
grade,
year.
sixth
Okay.
grade, ninth grade, and pretty
Okay.
much 12th grade. And pretty much by the time they get to to 12th grade, you're like pretty much doing the SAT. These tests are not even turned into anyone. They're asking you in the state of Georgia just to test your child, and you
Hmm.
just keep your records.
Yeah.
I kind of like keep a couple of things that my kids are doing. Now, when their children get to high school, that's the concern is college. Because I
Absolutely.
mean, why are we doing this school thing if you're not going to go to college? So here in Georgia, we have something called Georgia Futures. And so if you go to the Georgia Futures website, these are the people who run the Georgia Hope and the Zell Miller scholarships that pay for tuition here in Georgia.
Hmm.
And they have a whole method on there for how you as a homeschooling parent can go through that process. And that is you creating a transcript. We call that an unaccredited transcript, meaning it has no seal on it, nothing from the state. But you can have an accredited transcript by having a private school or a non-traditional education center actually accredit your transcript. Now, the non-traditional education center basically means that whatever way you want to form classes and whatever way you want to form them and have a course description and the books you're using, you can put those things together
Okay.
and have your transcript. Now
Oh
that
wow.
transcript can then be used by this non-traditional education center will put it in package it as a state of Georgia accredited transcript. And it just looked like it's coming from a regular private school going in.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about doing all the homeschool portfolios. I am a
Okay.
part of one here in Georgia. It's called Northeast Independent Preparatory Academy. There are various others here in Georgia that you can work with.
Hmm.
And they have done an amazing job. I've done transcripts two ways. So I've done transcripts unaccredited and accredited. And unaccredited means that you're finding ways to corroborate the transcript outside of yourself. So my oldest child did 32 semester hours of dual enrollment
Oh
before
wow.
he even got into college. and he
Wow. So
took
he
the
was already like
SAT.
several steps ahead of the curve then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He
Yeah.
was and so we were with him. We just basically were like, okay, we're just gonna do a transfer. We're just gonna say, hey, we're transferring in, and this is how we're gonna do that. The problem with that is the way I transferred in, that meant that he had to do 30 semester hours at the college before he could qualify for Hope. So the next
Oh, okay.
child,
Gotcha.
the child who, ADD child who has a couple of who has really just done amazing things. Um, he in turn didn't want to do dual enrollment. He wanted to do AP classes because AP classes take
Oh,
the whole
wow.
year instead of a semester. And
Yeah.
so he did AP classes, and we were like, well, we're just going to go ahead and go this accredited route. So his
Hmm.
transcript was packaged, and it just basically is a like a private school. The one thing about the non-traditional education centers is that they function as a way for your attendance, your record keeping. They even do workshops. You get access to an academic counselor
Okay.
and things like that. So the difference between these two options is you're either going to spend time doing it as a unaccredited transcript, or you're going to spend money as an
Yeah.
accredited transcript. And so I chose different pathways according to the child because one child was like, I'm not doing dual enrollment. And
Yeah.
it
Every
still
child is
worked out for
different.
him.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
worked out for him.
Absolutely.
He's at the younger ones at Morehouse, and I have other kids now. We're trying to make a decision. We have a 10th grader who we're trying to decide the direction we're going to go, more AP, or are we going to do dual enrollment?
Yeah.
Um, the main thing is just figuring out what your child needs. And I think that many parents are struggling in that way. So I would recommend if you're trying to find an organization that can really talk to you more about the academic advisement portion, we have the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA, and that is a an organization where it is a legal educational lobbying organization. And I think their dues maybe $12 a month. You get access to an educational attorney if you need it. Most of us will never need the educational attorney. You also get access to IEP specialists to
Hmm.
help you if you're trying to transition an IEP to home, academic specialists, high school advisors, college advisors, um, just various levels of from elementary all the way to high school. And I will recommend if someone is saying, I need a person to speak to, and you're not trying to pay a ton of money because it's
Yeah.
$12 a month,
Yeah.
I would recommend going to hslda.org. And I function as right now, I'm just one of their volunteer. I'm gonna say volunteer. I don't get paid. I'm one of their
Okay.
volunteer ambassadors for the state of Georgia. And one thing I do like about them is that if you occasionally have issues with homeschooling, which things have happened, people have had parents to pass, there have been
Yeah.
displacement. They do have a compassion grant fund where they will give a one-time grant to the family who's a member to help them through that year.
Wow. I didn't even think to even ask that question. I'm glad you touched on that because yeah, that is something that can catastrophically affect or impact that child's educational upbringing when it comes to their parent or guardian, if that matter, is obviously involved in their education and homeschooling them. But if something catastrophic happens like that, the death in the family, if something like that happens, then it's like, okay, how do we adjust? How do we go from here from that on? But a
the
couple of things that you,
educational the
yeah,
educational attorney portion is important because
yeah,
what people don't realize is that Black families are at a time of 5 times more than other families having defects getting to um, their business when it comes to attendance.
absolutely.
And there's
Listen, that
nothing
that
wrong with
attendance
having an
thing,
educational attorney on retainer that can
yeah,
send a letter. Many things, some things can just be cleared up with a letter that
yeah,
says, "Hey, I am such and such function on behalf of this family.
yeah,
Here's their declaration of intent." You don't need to open a case because it's harder to get children out of the custody of the state than it is to deal with it proactively. And I've had parents to say, "Hey, I got a letter about this." I'm like, "Hey, we don't play with a letter. If a letter comes in, they're asking, inquiring, you do not want them at your door." So I
absolutely
say
not.
be
Because then
proactive.
you'll
Treat
get
this as
children
a
and family
serious
services
threat.
involved, and yeah, you definitely don't want to have that. And I know obviously this is similar to this, but we've seen in the American education system where the idea of truancy, for that matter, has been pretty much laughable at this point. So we don't, on one hand, I'm always advocate for the teacher. I'm always in support of the teacher when it comes to children not showing up for class at all or showing up late and things like that. The parents have to be held accountable for this in some form of way. But then on the flip side of that, when you hold a parent accountable for it in the sense of throwing them in jail for a weekend or 30 days, that affects their bottom line in terms of their work and being able to provide a roof over their head, food in these kids' mouths. But it's like, and I can speak from experience when I say this. So I was a reading specialist for Memphis City Schools, 10 years ago. And right before they merged the two school districts together to form one school district, I was a reading specialist for third, fourth, and fifth grade kids. I had situations where one or two children would come to school almost every day at 10:30 in the morning, 10:30, and I'm just like, okay, what's going on at home? It's like, well, come to find out, this child wasn't even being raised by the parent, the grandmother raising it. It's like, well, my grandmother didn't feel like waking me up today, so or she didn't feel like waking me up on time to go to school, and I woke up by myself and I had to, get my clothes. I'm like, it's a fifth grade kid saying that, fifth grade, and it's like to understand what these kids are going through on an everyday basis. It's like they're going through so much that has something to do with education that their minds are not hyper focused on their educational piece. And so when you have those hands-on involved parents, that makes a world of difference because now the kid can really truly focus on their academics and education when they don't have to focus on survival mode or being worrying about where they're going to lay their head or where they're going to get their next meal and things like that. When they don't have to worry about those type of everyday living things, then they can really be hyper focused on their academics and really we can start to dive into what are they passionate about? What do they like doing the most?
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on this earlier about how homeschooling provides a way to really specifically dive into what your kids like the most about school. What is it that you're really passionate about? What is it that you do the best at? Or what subject is your favorite subject? Let's specifically zone in on that. Now we can start to expound on this and go even deeper than that and say, okay, well, you like social science? Okay, let's read about history. Let's read about geographics, or let's read about our African American history. Which, of course, you said something about an educational attorney. I would be curious to know what their educational attorney looks like in terms of what their involvement is. Excuse me, when it comes to AP African American history being studied or not being studied and being taken out of our curriculum in our education system today. But that's another story for today because I can go down a whole list of things that I have a problem with when it comes to the American education system as it pertains to taking out our history, which
Mm-hmm.
we all know our history is American history. But I want to go down that rabbit hole because, again, being a pro-black man will just piss me off. And I don't even want to touch on that right now. But
But
for
I also
you,
want to be
yeah.
clear, like, even though I'm homeschooling,
Yeah,
I am a public school, charter school, public school, private school supporter. I
absolutely.
believe that at the end of the day, that if you are able to do something different for your children and you are that blessed to have the social economics, the social currency, the financial currency to be able to go in capacity to do that, the patience, let's be honest, to do that, then that is beautiful. But I always feel like there's going to be a remnant.
Yeah,
There's going to be a remnant of society that it's just not going to happen for them. It can be circumstantial
yeah,
based upon their own decisions. It could be based upon systemic issues that are
absolutely.
just keeping them from definitely. So I always say that we need to have avenues of public education or we become a third world country.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
have to because the brown, the black, and the brown, the black, the poor, and the academically delayed
Yeah.
child will be the ones to suffer
Not
if we
only that,
do
I mean,
not
think
have
about this.
those. So,
We as
mhm.
parents, we still pay taxes that go towards, at least 10% of that go towards these public schools in the counties in which we live. So it's like we're still obviously that's a way of advocating for public schooling to be successful as it possibly can be because even still for people who have kids who are homeschooled, we're still paying taxes that's going towards the public schools. So it's like
Yeah,
that's still us supporting that effort, but it's understanding too that it's more ways to get into a house than the front door. And so our kids are, as long as it's your house that you're getting into, right? So, but it's understanding that our kids learn differently, and so we're in a society where now we have other avenues of ways to get to what's truly, uh, helping them learn and advance educationally. So we want to take advantage of that. And especially given the fact that us as Black people, we're disproportionately affected by everything that happens in this world. When the world catch a cold, Black people, we catch cancer. And that's how detrimental it has been for us in so many different facets of life, to where we have to take hold of what our kids' education is going to look like for us, because we know what's best for our kids better than anybody else does. And that's not to say
Yeah.
that that's not the same for other ethnicities and other groups, but I can't speak to that because I'm not
Hmm.
anti anything, but I'm pro us. I'm definitely pro us. And so I understand that the criticality of our kids' upbringing when it comes to their education, it is at an all-time high. And we have to be able to be more involved, hands-on involved in our kids' education more now than we ever been. And we're starting to see more avenues being provided to us to do that. And so for people who have the means and have the access and have the accommodations to homeschool their children, obviously take that avenue, because from your point and from your testimony here, you're speaking to the very successes of what's coming about, even homeschooling your children and just home educating them in general, right? And so I want to transition to ask you this question too, because this is very vital as well. Now, when it comes to extracurricular activities, what ways, or is there a hindrance to our children who are being homeschooled versus the classroom kids when they want to participate in playing football, playing different types of sports, basketball or tennis or anything for that matter? Are they still able to participate as if they were traditionally, classroom learned children?
Okay, so here in Georgia, as of last year, we have something called the Dexter-Mosley Act. And
Mm-hmm.
so that act is similar to like the Tim Tebow Act out of Texas, where the Tim Tebow Act, because Tim Tebow was totally homeschooled and he
Yeah,
only
yeah.
participated in Texas in the sports. And so now we have a Dexter Mosley Act here in Georgia. I think it was named after a student who wanted to do such things. And it says that your child can participate in extracurricular activities at the public school level, sports, as long as they can, of course, make the tryout and do those type of things. The only
Yeah.
other additional thing they ask is that every student um be able to that every student must take, I think, at least one class that's
Mm-hmm.
provided by the public school system. Now, we also have something called Georgia Virtual School,
Okay.
which is a platform that has a variety of classes, all the high school and middle school classes for the state of Georgia, pretty much many of the main classes on it, and they also have AP classes. You could sign up for one of those classes and never step foot in the classroom of that high school,
Oh wow.
but
Okay.
still step on the field
Yeah.
and participate with that. We also have some private schools here who function as, hey, if you want to participate in sports and you're good enough, just pay to be on the sports team. There are some
Yeah.
private schools like, hey, we don't care.
Yeah.
And everything. And if your child is taking AP class and you need to take the AP test, the counties, you can sign up to take the AP test on that day at the school, the same way you sign up to take the SAT
Okay.
or the ACT at a particular school or a particular location.
Yeah.
I know, yeah, with we even have available to us the governor's honors. Georgia Governor Honors um is available for homeschoolers who want to fill out that application and say that they want to be featured as one of those. I know one of my sons, he filled out that information to try to compete to be one of those, and one of those students. He didn't make it, but it was just the fact that at least the application is available
Yeah.
to him. I think the biggest thing that we are seeing is that even with our homeschooling children, everything is still, there's so many things that are open to them. And the pandemic pretty much did this when people were now at home and thinking, I don't want to go back to school, but why shouldn't I, if I pay taxes, be able to have my child participate in the sports? The only thing I will give parents a caveat on is to say, please take the time if you're doing this to make sure you're very aware of the NCAA requirements in reference to high school transcripts. So you can Google it, NCAA requirements, high school. to make sure that you're in order, because you would hate to be going through this process and there's something that you haven't taken care of, because NCAA does have their own very specific rules. And if you are participating in sports at one of these high schools, I'm pretty sure any high school coach would love to be able to say that I have students who came from my program and they were able to go to these particular areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially knowing that you have those success stories of kids who went off to be professional athletes, and to know their backstory was consisted of them being homeschooled. Like that's a tremendous, accomplishment. And that's a true testimony to the success that we're starting to see a lot more now than ever, especially within the last 3 years. And so I oftentimes bring up the last 3 years specifically because there are some silver linings in this pandemic that did happen, despite the fact the world shut down and we all went into a panic. After the smoke cleared or started to clear, we started to see things clearly. Now we start to be hyper focused on things that we probably took for granted earlier in life, whether it was our own lives or it was, impacting our children's lives. We start to actually, it forced us to have to sit still in real time and notice exactly what's happening now. And for us who took heed to that, now we're starting to be more involved in our kids' future and our kids' education, and to see that it went from 3% pre-pandemic to 16.5% of people who stayed in homeschooling their children. That's a tremendous accomplishment, and that
Mhm.
observation alone, that assessment alone, can truly tell you the true successes and the positiveness in homeschooling your children now. So, especially given that it's been Black people who have been advocating for this in the last 3 years, and we're seeing a huge influx of children who are still successfully and academically still staying afloat and still reading above grade level, math above grade level, even as traditional classroom children are learning too. So that within itself is still a tremendous accomplishment and story to tell, that I want to be able to disperse this kind of information to people who are inquiring about possibly going that route with homeschooling their children, and just what the ins and outs are, what the pros and cons are, and but understanding too, you as a parent, for parents out there who are thinking about transitioning your children over to homeschool, make sure you do your research, because every state looks different too. And so obviously every state have their own different policies and laws in place,
Yes.
different nuances to that effect, how different resources that's provided, because certain states may not provide the same amount of resources that Georgia provides. And so that success rate and failure rate may look different because of the fact that the access to the curriculums, or being able to go to traditional accredited or non-accredited way, not every state is providing that. But we're starting to see now that more states are starting to put more resources into these avenues, to where if people are taking this option full on to homeschool their children, all right, now we're going to give you all the leeway and all the curriculum that you need, and provide those resources that you need to help them homeschool them successfully. So, um, and I know for you, you're specifically here in Georgia, but is there anything that you could speak to when it comes to other states? Are you familiar with any other states' rules or even laws that's in place for homeschooling children?
So I do know that in other states, the laws vary from state to state,
Yeah,
and you have some states where there are hardly any rules, and you have some states that just say we just want to know you're doing it, and some states who
yeah,
say I need you on a yearly basis to turn in a complete portfolio of what you
okay,
did and turn in the curriculum sets of what you're about to study. I would say for anybody who's trying to figure it out state by state, hslda.org would be your best bet for knowing the individual things state by state. And then if you're having issues with your state, they can also step in that to help you navigate protecting yourself as a parent.
yeah,
Because like like my husband said, he said, girl, you don't have defects at my house. I mean, that is of actual a fear of some Black
yeah,
parents, that
yeah,
somebody will end up at my doorstep to try to intervene or take a child out of my household.
absolutely.
And so I
That
will
is a big
always say,
concern.
parents, if you got any kind of letter from the school system, from the school board, from your principal at your school, say your child hasn't been to school, and you filled out the necessary paperwork, because this has happened. Paperwork has been filled out. The school didn't get the message. And so they're mandatory reporters. So next thing you know, you got people checking on you and
Yeah,
everything. I will say, do never ignore written correspondence in
absolutely
reference to
not.
your child's attendance,
Yep,
in reference to your child's well-being, mental, academic, and physical.
yep.
Because you think you're just reading like, oh, these nosy people. They are
No,
putting
when that
together a
school
case
seal
file.
is on that letter and that state seal is on that damn letter, you better read that damn letter
They putting
because
together file.
because
Don't
after that
play.
letter, what's next to come won't be a letter no more. It's gonna be
And
right
it's
at
at
the
the
front door.
discretion. It's the discretion
Yeah,
of that officer who's at your door. And let's be honest, in any type of black families matter, and
absolutely.
um any kind of engagement with law enforcement, it can, I mean, statistically, it's we know the statistic, and I you just don't want to
Fortunately,
have those type
yeah,
of interactions.
yeah.
So, be vigilant, and also make sure that your paperwork is in order
Absolutely.
in
Don't
that
just
kind
take
of
them
way
out of school
according
and
to
then
your
you ain't fill
state.
out the paperwork. Like, no, listen,
Yeah,
there's levels to this now. You got to be
it's
able
levels.
there's checks and balances to this. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence and making sure you're filling out the right forms and paperwork. And then you check up on the statuses of that with the school. Hey, did you guys get my paperwork? Did you guys process this? Did you guys
Hmm.
are you all fully notified that my child is now no longer in the traditional ways of the
And I
classroom here
go,
at the school?
and I go even so for myself, I'm a person who's pretty generally organized, and I know that everybody's not going to do as much as I'm going to do. But for me, what I do every year, and I actually have it here, every year, this is my accordion style little book. And on here,
Right.
it's actually written on here, it says homeschool documents.
See,
So I
see,
print out my declaration of intent and I put it in here.
mhm.
Also, because I do this on a yearly basis anyway, my child, when he or she has their physical, their little, just their yearly annual checkup.
Yeah,
I even say, hey, can I, they print out the little paper that says, the child's within, the weight and all that. I throw that in there too. And
yeah,
also, and while I'm there, I always say, hey, can you do me a sports physical since I'm here
yeah,
and everything? I do have some, and that's just in case my child participates in sports. Some parents who are homeschooling, they're not about vaccinations and vaccinating. That's fine. If you're not, I always say, do what's best for your family.
yeah.
I do things a certain way around here, and so you may not do it that way. But if there's the vision, the dental, whatever paperwork about your child that can show physical well-being, go ahead and
Absolutely,
put that in the file. It's not, I
absolutely.
mean, you will never, I mean, I got a 21-year-old. I mean, he has a box from all those years of homeschool. I don't know somebody like somebody gonna show up and ask me for it, but
Right, right.
I
But
just,
but
it's
just in
just
the
being
event that it
prepared.
does happen, though, you can never be too prepared, right? So that situation that's actually a very key thing to actually do because you want to make sure you got all the paperwork and all the receipts, if you will, to verify and validate what took place here, right? So, but even speaking about the vaccination piece, so obviously we know if you are attending public schools, you have to be vaccinated, right? So that's the key thing.
Not
Now,
totally,
homeschooling
not
may
totally.
be different.
Some there are exemptions that people fill out in reference to that piece. I do know that as far as like
Yeah, the
our
religious
homeschool
exemptions,
group,
yeah.
we leave it up to the individual family. So I speak for myself. I vaccinate my sister, 7 kids doesn't like that. And
Okay.
so we kind of like say to the parent, what are you comfortable with?
Yeah.
And what are you not comfortable with? My only basic thing is, hey, if your child has a fever or runny nose, don't bring them up here to co-op. Like,
See, and listen, that's what I'm saying.
and
So
I send a
that has to
weekly
be
email
specified because
reminder
if you as a
about that.
homeschooler have vaccinated your children and someone else who's homeschooling their children didn't vaccinate them, I don't know if I can have you around. So I know that there's a community of parents who have obviously gotten together over the course of a period of time to homeschool their children together because you start to put those resources together and be able to work as a community. True enough. But at the same time, you just spoke about how certain people can differ when it comes to vaccination, when it comes to certain ways that they go about. Okay, well, listen, my children, they're not in public school anymore, so they don't have to be vaccinated. But You're saying, no, I'm going to do that to just as precaution, making sure that this is still a thing that's still happening out here. These different viruses and infections and things like that. We don't want to exacerbate this, but we know the medical facts. Again, Black people, do your research. On this show, I've actually had my cousin, who is a clinical nurse specialist for the state of Georgia. She's one of the top clinical nurse specialists for the state of Georgia. She has been on this show talking about the importance of vaccinating our children. Again, I went to public school. I was vaccinated. What flabbergasted me about certain people, and I won't go down this rabbit hole too much, but people who have been on social media during this pandemic, well, I'm not going to get that shot. I'm not going to get the vaccine. Well, okay, say you're not going to get that, right? But you went to public school, you got vaccinated, okay? You got the measles, you got the flu vaccinations, you got these other vaccinations that we had to get when we were kids. Now you're an adult. Now you're just going to say, oh, no, I don't have to do all that, or my kid's not going to do that. But you yourself was conditioned to happen to do that in order to go to public school. Like, it's not making any sense. But again, I will digress from that subject because I know even to this day, it's still a touchy subject for people who obviously have their own trepidations and concerns about it. Some of it is legitimate. I get that. But some of it is just flat out ridiculous. And I want to make sure I point it out too. But anyway, my
But
last question to
also
you.
it's about
Yeah, yeah,
parental autonomy. So
absolutely.
parents
Yes.
choosing parents choosing their own curriculum. That's a
Yep.
part of this. Like, so you got parents that choose their curriculum, you got parents that are choosing their children's activities, they're choosing the medical direction with vaccination, they're choosing um just a lot of things. And I think that the main thing that I've always in my community was like, be community enough to understand that if you have something going on, don't come. That's just the way it is. And but
Real.
also understand that we pull back and say, you figure it out for your family. I always say like individual families have individual things. As long as you're
Absolutely.
and so I always
Long as it
tell
don't
families
impede
research
on other
research what you
families.
need for your children,
Yep.
make decisions about it in that way, and go in that direction, and try to be blessed in what you do, because you are trying to preserve health and safety of children so you can have a legacy. Like,
Absolutely.
so you
Again,
can
yeah,
have
yeah.
that.
You
But
choose in the
yeah.
best interest of you for you and your family, but make sure you understand that whatever your decision is can't impede on the next family situation, right? So we don't want to be an imposition. We don't want that. We don't want to impose. We don't want to impede on anyone else's decisions that they've made for themselves and their families by basically intervening or corrupting what has been established for that particular individual family, right? So that's very key and important that we have to notate that because yeah, every family is different, everyone makes different decisions, but make sure you're making legitimate decisions with the right information. The most dangerous tool to be used against humanity is misinformation. That has killed more people than any gun, than any plane crash, than any bomb, than anything. Misinformation and the mishandling of that information has killed more people or even done more harm to people than anything else. The ill-informed, what we don't need no more is ill-informed people. And we don't need more ill-informed people, ill-informing people, if that makes any sense. But anyway, so my last question to you in regards to this. So when it comes to this idea of just kind of circling back the homeschooling aspect, let me see how I want to word this. So obviously, when it comes to the differences of how our kids interact with other kids, what are some of the genuine concerns that you have heard when it comes to like group projects and things like that? Because a lot of times, the one thing that we can truly give kudos to the traditional ways of learning in the classroom is that most of these classrooms are structured to where kids are participating in class projects, working in teams, and being able to provide ways of developing people skills, right? And becoming better in groups rather than just individualism. So for you, when it comes to homeschooling, what ways is that being incorporated within the homeschooling curriculum when it comes to working on projects with a partner or with a group of other kids?
Well, one of the biggest ways that I've seen homeschoolers really be able to work collaboratively is
Mm,
that people forget a part of working collaboratively with other groups is also about the ability to be accountable for your portion of what you're supposed to
absolutely.
do. And
Absolutely.
so when you do, even though we have individuality and autonomy, you do have these children who have the ability to say, you know what? This is the job. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm at least gonna show up at the table and do my portion. We've all had group projects where we like, Lord, why did the teacher put me with this person
Yeah.
who's not gonna do what they're supposed to do? They're not gonna do
Yeah.
what they're supposed to do. And they are
Yeah.
unapologetic about the fact
Absolutely.
that they are ready for that F. And you're looking at them like, really? We
Or
haven't
they
even
ready to ride
started.
your coattail to get the A that you got just
Yeah,
because they own the team. And we see that in work spaces too, but I won't even get off into the how
exactly.
to adult.
So one thing about homeschooling is that even though we're talking about individuality, there's also this thing of I am responsible for what I'm supposed to do. And I always say to my kids, I have a phrase around here, my children give me their work. I was like, is that your God's best? And they'll be like, what? And I'll be like, so if you went before the Lord Jesus with this paper right here that you just gave me for homework, would he say that this right here looks like some best? Can this be a form of worship
Right,
or what is
right.
this? And it's so funny because I wouldn't even have checked it or looked at it over. I was like, is this your God's best? And they kind of go,
You be hitting them with
let
that
me pull that back
what
one
would
more time.
Jesus do, huh?
But they pull it back for a second, they look at it, they review
That's
because I'm
funny.
making them take a good eye look at
Absolutely.
my husband is the funniest thing in the world. He thinks
Yeah.
that's so funny. He said, you should see their eyeballs when they go, hold up, let me check my handwriting. So but my
Yeah,
thing is that your best? You know,
absolutely.
black excellence is a thing.
It is.
Let's just be
Agree.
honest. We show up, and I never want to be with my children in the space of saying you are responsible to show up for everybody and represent all black people. No, no, no. I don't want that done. That's we've all had that pressure on us. And
Absolutely.
it's not cool. My thing is, have you done your best in this space? I honestly do believe that people are met with grace and mercy when they show up with their best. Like you've
Absolutely.
done all you can do on your
Absolutely.
portion. So when it comes to collaborative group work, that is a portion. Here's another thing about it. Most of the homeschoolers that I know, especially during the pandemic, a portion of our homeschooling that many of us have incorporated is volunteerism.
Hmm. Okay.
We are volunteering because during the pandemic, you have teachers and middle school kids who are saying, I'm looking at the issue and I'm upset. And so you're having these conversations with them. So since I'm having these conversations with these children, rather than just hearing your concerns and being like, okay, get over it, that's the way of the world,
Right.
I need to put your hands to the plow to let you know that you are a global citizen, you are powerful, and you can change some stuff. So
Absolutely. That
since
affirmation
I
means a
can
lot. That means a
since
lot.
I can give you that, let's go find an organization we can volunteer with. And I know over the pandemic, many of the kids in our organization volunteered with a food pantry here called Hugs and Hope Community Table. And just to see the this is a former homeschool mom and she had this food pantry and over the pandemic here she is serving 400 500 people per week. And
Wow.
to have that type of, because that's what the need was, and to look at the homeschooling community and say, hey, kids, y'all want to come up here? And so they're packing groceries and they're in the line and they're doing the mobile pantry. And then we have some kids who actually were taking my son, two of my sons took ASL, American Sign Language, as their foreign language. And then to have people from the deaf community coming through the line and the kids can actually communicate with them and ask them, did you want additional milk? Did you want this? And to watch them understand that yes, it is good to be academically prepared and get all the opportunities in the world, but there are always going to be some people. Well, that's not necessarily their situation.
Absolutely.
And it's not for you to stand in a place and to judge them, but just to show up and help. You don't necessarily, and I always tell my kids, everybody's not gonna thank you. Everybody's not gonna give you a pat on the back. I'm like, honey, you ain't gonna get a cookie for this.
Yeah.
But if we are all in the world taking a spot to teach our kids that, hey, in your small way, what can you do in
Hmm.
a way to help the world? And it may not be the food pantry. There
Yeah.
was another opportunity where the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., had gotten a very large allotment of the freedom papers. And
Okay.
so they were looking for high schoolers to help transcribe those papers who could read cursive. Here's an interesting thing. Homeschoolers, we teach our children cursive.
See, listen, I love this already because they've taken cursive handwriting out of the curriculum. Well, this had to have been maybe 5, 6 years ago. Excuse me, it's been a while since we've actually seen our kids practicing cursive handwriting and understanding the difference between that and printing their name. And so that's still key. We listen, we may not sign as many checks as we used to, but we still sign our signature on certain things, on certain documents that still require our signature. How are we going to even teach our kids about learning what a signature is if they're not even
Yes.
learning how to write in cursive in school?
And looking at that history, here's the thing. So if these high schools who can volunteer to do that are looking at post Civil War freedmen bureaus, journals, and transcripts
And they
to
read that.
be a part
Wow.
of the African American Museum. You can't tell me out here in this world there are not some real opportunities, some aha moment. And the thing about it, another homeschooling mom happened to see it on a website, and so she sent it to me, and here I go putting it up on Facebook and Instagram and wherever I can. Hey y'all, do y'all have any children who want to do that? Who want to be a part of that? It's it's constant. This is where I always come back to when we're community. I say I have a homeschool mom. She runs the food pantry. She needed some employees or she needed some children who were voluntold to be
You're
helpful.
voluntold.
You're voluntold. You're going to be
I love
helpful.
these different words that you're throwing out there. You just making them up as you go along. I'm going to make sure I add this in the comments and in the description of this episode because I think you said edupreneur and
Yes.
voluntold and something else you said. I
But
got to remember these words too.
edupreneur is actually a word that was coined by another organization. I saw it and I said
Okay,
EDU
I love that too.
PEREN.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the word like edupreneur. That's really cool.
yeah.
And so my mama said that used to say that you've been voluntold. So she's like you're gonna do it, but I need
Yeah,
your spirit to be like I wanted to.
absolutely. I need you to be upbeat and positive
I
about
need you
doing
to be
this.
upbeat
Yeah,
because,
absolutely.
obedience is complete, immediate, and cheerful, as she would
Absolutely.
say. And you're like, really? But it's just like trying to help our kids understand that there are a lot of issues in the world. We don't hide. I mean, people think that homeschooling kids are, like pulled away and everything. I'd like for my kids to understand the issues of the world, especially at an age appropriate level. Of course, they're high
Yeah.
schoolers and middle schoolers, but also to understand. So, why do we have these issues? What are the historical, systemic things that have created this? What laws? Like just recently, my sixth grade daughter was looking at a court case of Fred Kuwamatsu. He was a Japanese American who hid for the United States government when they told him to go to an internment camp. He was like, who going? So
Yeah.
I'm not. And so, we're looking at different cultures and saying, okay, so these
Yeah.
people were put in an internment camp. And you're seeing the connection between the Native American Indian relocation schools and slavery
Yeah.
and chattel slavery and looking at Jim Crow. And even though we're looking at many hard things in history,
Hmm.
we are looking at it from the lens of dignity. To
Absolutely.
being like, look at all the stuff we overcome, but let's not get it twisted. The world still has work to do. I
Yeah.
can look back and understand in looking back, look at where we're going, but we need to go further. And with me and with homeschooling and with any parent, not just homeschooling, any parent that is standing in the place to educate their children, I just want to make sure I tell them, you are the key to your child's success.
Absolutely.
You know more, you can do more, you're more capable than you know how to be. You have the ability to access communities on behalf of your child. You're the guard at the gate.
Yep.
You're the architect for the house.
Yep.
You're the
First
prophet,
line
priest,
defense.
provider, and you're
Yep.
keeping it. You're the first line of defense. You are the encourager. And having these relationships with your children, you're going to see a legacy of as they get to be older and your relationship transition, they're still coming back to you and they're having conversations with you. You are not just a supervisor. Guess what? You are the advisor, and that is a beautiful place to be in
Absolutely.
in their lives when they choose you to be a
Yep.
part of everything they're doing. And so I that's my main thing. We want to equip, encourage, and energize any parent for the educational journey they're having ahead for their children.
Absolutely. And you know what? And on that note, we can definitely leave it at that because that is key to the upbringing and the growth and development of our children. It's being hands-on involved and being vigilant and just overall being able to provide a space for our kids to voice their thoughts and opinions about things that they're having trouble with or things that concerns them, things that excite them too. We want to be able to be so in tune with our kids that they look back, like you said, they come back to us when they get older and say, I remember when you allowed me to speak about this, or you gave me this opportunity to go into this type of field, this area, whatever. So those type of things stick with them is longer than we would ever know. And I know my uncles and grandfathers used to once tell me like when kids are young, when they at the toddler stages, right? They gravitate to you. They are just glued to your hip all day, every day, right? When they become adolescent teens, they don't want to do with you. They know everything about nothing, right? So they just, oh, my mother don't know what she's talking about. My dad just be saying this stuff. But then when they become adults, they go right back to the child state where they just like, you know what? Let me call my mom, let me call my dad, just ask them and just talk to them. Let me go just set up a time we can go sit down, have dinner together or have lunch together and have talk about life and talk about some things that he taught me or things that my mom said and things like that. They start to reminisce on things that stuck with them that they're still carrying to this day that's really helping them in their life as they're becoming adults and becoming up their own responsibilities. And so those types of things, we have to be able to be mindful of that as parents and knowing that each and every stage of our kids' lives, we have to be active. It just to a different capacity, obviously. But the younger they are, the more involved we have to be. As they get older, we start to be less involved, but still there, still advising, but doing less supervising when it comes to, all right, I trust you to trust you. I'm going to trust you enough to do this on your own. You obviously have these type of responsibilities ahead of you. Let's see how well you do it. And if you need help, I will come back to me and we can regroup and figure this thing out together. As you get older, when you become an adult, now it's can you ride that bike on your own now? But then that even speaks to the very premise of you as a parent. Did you really do everything you could do for that child in their upbringing? And I know some people, again, when it comes to their scheduling, when it comes to different life situations happening, for them, they may not be as involved in certain aspects. But again, your children never forget how involved you were with them. When it comes to homeschooling your
Mm-hmm.
children, I want to put this out there for people who were inquiring about doing this, that there are other avenues to educating your child. And homeschooling it seems to be not necessarily a new phenomenon, but it's a growing phenomenon. And we're seeing a lot of people now getting involved in a lot more. And so, what I want our Black community to do is, if you're in a space to homeschool your child, do your research. Be able to really say you were your child's
Mm-hmm.
teacher and their parent at the same time, and you were able to help them, in areas they were lacking in, and improve a lot more than they could even in the traditional ways of the classroom. You want to be able to say and give yourself that pat on the back and say, yeah, I think I did a pretty good job. And you deserve to say that. Parents deserve the right to brag about their kids, and parents deserve the right, kids deserve the right to brag about their parents. Like my mom, my dad does this and everything. So that is very key. And I really appreciate you for sharing such insight on this subject because obviously, like I said, the American education system is shaky right now, to say the least. And there's so much that's going on. And even as it pertains to us as Black people, with our history not
Mm-hmm.
being fully told. The other way of it being told is our parents being involved in our kids' lives, telling them this, taking them to the African American Museum in DC, or taking them to different local museums within their areas of their cities and states. Being able to be vigilant and being actively involved that way does help educate them in some forms of ways that the classroom can't, or the classroom is not allowed to in this particular point in time. Anyway, again, Nicole, thank you so much for being on the show to talk about this. This has been very important, very helpful. And I'm hoping to all my listeners that listen out here, out here liking and sharing, subscribing to this podcast. Make sure y'all like this episode, particularly because this is very important for those of you who have children, especially the younger ones, who are thinking about this as a possibility of homeschooling your children. Make sure you do your due diligence and research in your local areas, cities and states, and make sure that you know the ins and outs of what it takes to homeschool your children. Because not every
Mhm.
state looks the same when it comes to legislation and different laws and policies that's been passed, and even resources too. You want to make sure that the right resources are given to you so that you can pass that resources on to your children to help them learn and stay abreast and stay above reading and math levels and things of that nature. Again, Nicole, thank you so much. I do look forward to having you on the show again to even expound more on this as well, because this is an ongoing and continuous conversation that we have to have in order to get more of our parents involved in their kids' education.
All right. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it, and definitely will be circling back. And I hope that you and your family stay blessed and stay safe.
All right. You too.
If you like what you've heard from this week's episode and would like to hear more from previous episodes, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel below. You can also find me on social media platforms at Speak to the Mic _podcast show on Instagram and Speak to the Mic podcast show on Facebook. Be sure to also like, share, and subscribe to my Spotify page at Speak to the Mic podcast show. As I put out more thought-provoking content, your opinion and thoughts are needed and appreciated. I thank you all in advance for your support and look forward to hearing from you soon.